Timeliness? Who needs it? Here's a bunch of stuff you still probably haven't heard people say about Marvel Spider-Man 2. Hey, Chris Baker here, and if it's your first time at superhero.vg, welcome. Those of you who have been with me since 2017 know I myself worked on 5 Spidey games when I worked at Marvel Games. And now as a fan who's also a game writer, it's fun to look back at what Insomniac is doing and add what I hope you'll agree is some pretty unique perspective. Let's start off by admiring Kraven. First, I just want to applaud Insomniac for making one of the most ridiculous costumes in Spidey's Rogues Gallery look completely badass. Somehow this all just works, even if it looks like his lion vest doesn't shoot lasers. Let's look at that face detail too. He's obviously been scratched by something, likely just to show he's seen some stuff in his day. But what if the stuff were something we know? Maybe he got goosed like Nick Fury, for instance.
Who's a good kitty, huh? Huh, Goose?
Or maybe a certain other Earth 1048 superhero got close enough for a little scrape. I mean, the scars are too close together for that, really, but it's fun to think about. But I think we can draw some fairly more certain conclusions from some of the other stuff Kraven is wearing. There's some pretty big teeth around his neck, about the same size as the ones attached to the skull on his shoulder, which looks similar to his, codpiece. Respect the codpiece. You ask me? This dude's been hunting Zabu's friends in the Savage Land. I don't think we'll see the Savage Land, but I do believe there will be an offhand reference or two to his time there. And somewhere along the way, Sergei picked up some underlings. Lots and lots of underlings. This is a little out of character for a hunter known to work alone, but sometimes when you're developing a licensed game, you just need to break from tradition a bit in service of gameplay. We need guys for Spidey to beat up, and a bunch of mini Kravens offers lots of potential, as we saw from scenes like this one. I personally greenlit this type of thing for Shattered Dimensions, with very little backstory for Kraven wannabes, and no one batted an eye. But to that end, I do expect the question of why Kraven leads so many associates to actually be addressed in a satisfying way. And at the end of the day, it's a video game, and you need interesting dudes to fight. One of these dudes hands Kraven a tablet that very conveniently maps out where the Spider-Men, and most of their adversaries over their respective 2 past games, are suspected to be. I've heard some people saying they think this means all will play a role in the story. I think we might see most of them. The character models are there after all. But I'll be shocked if more than a third of them play any meaningful role in the overall narrative. This is a new story that will hopefully introduce us to even more new characters Spidey is tangled with over the years. Hopefully some new faces we don't usually see as well. Take everyone's new favorite nobody, the Spot, for example. He'd basically be the game Portal as a boss fight. Amazing potential there. I looked really hard to find any meaningful Easter eggs on the tablet, and there's really not much of anything. I will say I really like that Tombstone appears to have set up shop in Hell's Kitchen. His second archenemy after Spidey is Daredevil, after all. Wouldn't surprise me if we get some sort of hint they've been going at it to some degree. I do have an interesting theory regarding where this magical tablet came from, though, and it connects with this particular moment right here. Yes, we all know that's Genki in control of a drone from Kraven, but the way it flew in, its initial shape, did it maybe remind you of a certain other iconic Spidey villain we haven't actually seen yet? Now, I don't know what it is, but I do believe there's some connection between Norman Osborn and Kraven's advanced tech. I mean, the tip just pretty much comes out of nowhere in the context of the Kraven jungle scene, doesn't it? Maybe the tablet was delivered to Kraven's clan, and this one guy was picking just the right moment to show him. Next to this Kraven gunship, again, not a very Kraven thing to own, and he may have the mayor to thank for it, gives us a nice view of New York City with the expected staples there if you look hard enough. Roxxon, Oscorp, Avengers Tower, Calexco. Expected returns, but nice to see nonetheless. If we take a closer look at the gunship, we see a couple things maybe of note. First, the lion symbol. We'll see it again later in the trailer, and it's pretty obvious that Kraven has adopted a symbol for himself. Again, not something he would have taken the time to do in a more classical representation of the character. But if he's leading a whole clan, yeah, why wouldn't you have a symbol like this? There's also prime Easter egg material in the form of this string of letters and numbers, OA0914. It's very likely nothing, but let me know if you can come up with anything. It's certainly no Amazing Fantasy reference like we had with the Mr. Negative gameplay trailer in 2017. Near as I can tell, the only Marvel comic with the initial OA was Occupy Avengers from 2016, which has nothing to do with Spidey. We already know 9/14 is not a secret release date flashed before us. Could there be a reference to something from September 2014, perhaps? Best I have on that end is that's when the character Sylph debuted. I doubt we're gonna get her in this, but just in case, you heard it here first. Of course, I love seeing Midtown High. And here's a fun but kind of strange detail I only caught by scrutinizing this footage. You can see a crowd of neighbors gathered there, like they heard a big crash from the Connors' backyard. But then there's this dude right in the thick of it, just sweeping his porch like it ain't no thing. Oh, just another batch of mercenaries crashing through my fence. Typical Thursday in Queens. Cue Spidey's reveal in the black suit. Can you see what's different about this costume compared to the comics? Look at the hands. See it? What about now? That's right, in the comics there's traditionally more of a white shape on the back of his hands. It started out as a triangle in Secret Wars, but it's usually more of a rectangle or square. Never an arrow shape like we see here. That's not a bad thing, in fact I think it looks pretty cool, but I do wonder if there's a reason for that. Especially considering the props I'm about to give Insomniac regarding how this suit connects to their previous Spidey game. Remember how controversial the Venom spider was the first time we saw it? Most of us came to love it, or like me at least accept it. But forget all you know for a second, and just think logically. More so than ever, the big white spider that Spidey wears with the black suit makes in-universe sense. It's not exactly the same spider as the suit he was already wearing, shining through the symbiote, but it's pretty close. Maybe the symbiote added that extra point at the top to show who's really in charge in this relationship. Whatever the case, the suit is basically just his old one doused in black goo, which is something it never was in the comics. Incidentally, do you know why the 80s black suit spider looks the way it does? As he says in this panel, it's probably because he liked the design of Julia Carpenter's Spider-Woman, whose shape it echoes. Not even Spidey knows for sure. But now, it just makes sense as a design choice. But by the same logic, it's extra strange that he now has an arrow on his hand. His typical suit already has a similar shape to the traditional black suit. We see Spidey go absolutely nuts on Kraven's goons here, not pulling any punches, and being dead serious when he speaks to Miles.
Sounds like Kraven's checking off his...
We don't have much time. Move.
Guess we'll chat later?
Except for right here for some reason.
Right! I've got the metal murder bird!
The Metal Murder Bird comment really stands out as being too normal Spidey, if you will. Clever and fun, even if spoken in a more serious voice. As my friend Matt pointed out, the way the black suit is treated is, believe it or not, also a diversion from the comics. Before Venom came along, the black suit very much was just a cool-looking black suit. It didn't make Peter extra angry or aggressive or anything like that. That angry version, which it must be said I think most of us would deem to be superior, didn't come along until the animated series about a decade later. And it's pretty much been that way ever since.
For a second I thought I was going out of my mind.
Ooh, and now we have this, which has gotta have another Easter egg. It's destroying my brain. For a while I thought maybe a release date of the 20th of November 2023 was encoded here, but we know it's coming out a month earlier than that now. But this odd string of letters and numbers has to mean something, right? It's just too oddly placed and otherwise unnecessary not to. Could just be a troll. Anyway, so now it's Miles' time to shine with new gliding abilities and whatnot. I really like the image that comes up for Peter as his normal costume, because that's the picture Miles has in his phone, of course. Soon enough, Miles sees Kraven's crew unloading from the gunship, and added OA0914 to rub in how hard it is to guess as well. Ooh, maybe they just really like Green Lantern. And then a nice gameplay showcase of Miles' abilities. I don't have a ton to add here, looks great. Let's move forward a bit. Peter enters dramatically, is appropriately cold in all business, and then I found this line interesting.
Hey, Mr. Parker.
Genki just called him Mr. Parker. And if you remember, the end of the Miles game hinted that Peter was going to get into teaching like he does in the comics for a bit. Do you think maybe Genki's a student? I kinda do, actually. And then the lizard shows up, looking straight out of the Rock's Rampage movie. Just kidding, I like it quite a bit. Eventually, Kraven shows up, wearing basically the same thing he had on 6 months ago. I hope it's been washed at least a couple times. And we know he's all about branding now because he made sure to throw that logo inside the boat's interior. And this guy. He's probably just a random tour guide guy, but what fun is that? Here's an off-the-wall prediction for you. That's Flash Thompson trying to make ends meet after his high school glory days. Maybe he'll join the army soon. I do think there's a Flash-like reverence for and familiarity with Spidey here.
Spider-Man! It's Spidey on right
And
now!
here we have what's really our only look at Spidey web swinging. I still can't quite make out if what I hope is the case is indeed the case. In the comics, the black suit shoots webs from the tops of his hands through the aforementioned white squares. Is he doing that here? Or is it a more traditional thwip from the wrist? What do you see? I mean, it's not wrong if it's from the wrist, just not as cool. From the top of his hand makes it look like every web swing is a punch, indicative of the suit's aggression as well. Come to think of it, he does actually throw punches like that earlier. Yet the box art also indicates the symbiote-influenced standard thwip form. I wouldn't lean too hard on that though. In my first draft of this script, back when I fooled myself into thinking I could have this out by Memorial Day, this is where I said I didn't think Peter would turn out to be Venom as many people were saying. Though I do fully expect him to be very Venom-like by the time he gets rid of the suit. But then my script went on to say that I thought Venom actually would be Eddie Brock, and, well...
What's the origin of Eddie Brock Venom? Or
It is not Eddie Brock.
okay.
I've known Brian for 20 years. He's a really clever guy, and he's also super honest. He didn't lie there. But allow me to keep hope alive with some semantics.
What's the origin of Eddie Brock Venom? Or
It is not Eddie Brock.
okay.
Notice, Brian answers after Jeff specifically asks if it's the origin of Venom. As an origin character,
It is not Eddie Brock.
Okay.
or maybe even just in the specific image.
It is not Eddie Brock.
Okay.
But maybe by the end of the game, the symbiote switches hosts, and it is Eddie Brock. Okay, maybe it's Spider-Man 3, maybe it's Spider-Man 4. I do think it's going to happen eventually. And I do think Eddie Brock, maybe just as a human, is going to be part of Spider-Man 2. Just a hunch, just my own personal biases speaking, but I think it's going to happen. A lot of people are realizing the spider resembles the one Venom used when Matt Gargan was the host. But I wouldn't take too much stock in that. Web of Shadows looked very similar to that as well, and that was all Eddie. Harry Osborn is a prime candidate, of course, given the post-credit scenes of both the original Spider-Man and Miles game, and I guess that's a distinct possibility, if predictable. Funny enough, I believe the last major Venom appearance in a console game may have been Disney Infinity, whose Spider-Man stuff was based on Ultimate Spider-Man's cartoon, where Harry was the first Venom host. The game itself is vague about his human identity, but it's kinda Harry. And speaking of post-credit scenes, can we just take a moment to enjoy how great it is to have at least one ongoing Marvel gaming universe? This is the first time any console-based Marvel canon has made it past 2 games, and I believe it's the first time that post-credit sequences have actually paid off. Remember how there was never a Punisher 2 for Kingpin?
The Punisher must die, and at my hands.
No Galactus as the antagonist for Ultimate Alliance 2?
I will destroy their planet.
And as much as I really tried to create a universe for the last couple Spidey games I worked on, no Kingpin again for the Amazing Spider-Man 3.
Now, the real work begins.
And though I do firmly believe that stuff like Guardians of the Galaxy and the upcoming games from EA and Skybound could fit into this same Earth 1048 without much issue, they really could, and honestly really should. It's also nice to know that the universe will expand even more with Wolverine. Finally, a couple more Kraven-related predictions. As my friend Godzilla Mendoza mentioned in his video, I believe that Kraven is the setup man for the story. He may pop up again later, and his goons will be there to fight throughout the game, but you won't see much, if any, of Kraven himself after the end of Act 1. And that ties into my next prediction. You will see a lot of him again in DLC, because that is where the famous Kraven's Last Hunt storyline will be adapted. It even makes sense for him to wear the black suit, because that's the only Spidey he's been up against. I'll end with another prediction I totally spoiled on Twitter and Reddit. No, not that I think Kraven killed Grizzly and stole all his outfits, but there you go. Have a look at the name of the foundation that's basically in the center of the screen of the new promotional image. What could Emily May Foundation mean? Well, here's a clip from the most deep-cut focused Easter egg video on the internet to cover the first part.
It remains to be seen if she, Norman's wife, actually faked her death as she did in the comics.
Pass.
The answer is Emily. Emily Osborn.
Emily Osborn.
Emily was the beloved wife of Norman Osborn and beloved mother to Harry, who died of the same disease we learn Harry has been fighting. And of course, a certain May we all know very well was also beloved and is recently deceased. I believe that Norman Osborn founded this charity, possibly even as a front for nefarious dealings, to honor his wife and his son's best friend's beloved family member. There could even be some sort of sick twist to it, like it's what brought Venom into the world, or what could eventually spawn the Green Goblin. What do you think? Thanks for joining me today. If you haven't checked out these Easter egg videos for the previous games, I assure you, you're going to find some stuff you had no idea was out there until now. And while I can't promise as many Spidey videos as I used to make, it doesn't mean I won't try. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Respect the codpiece.